Alright, everybody, it's time to talk about Kavanaugh again because, due to the Democrats, we really can't talk about anything else in the country anymore at all. It does seem a lot like all other news cycles have stopped in the wake of these allegations, this Senate hearing, and just based on the fact that Kennedy retired almost 3 months ago by this point. This week left us with no shortage of things to talk about when we talk about all things Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court. There have been a slew of new accusations coming out, including a new accuser. And there was a Time article out there that is just absolutely so disgusting in concept, I almost couldn't believe it was real. I had to check the URL 3 or 4 times to make sure I was reading something from Time.com and not The Onion. But we'll talk about that one at the end of this video. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record as we sit down and listen to these videos one after another, but the goalpost of this entire situation seems to continue to be nothing but delay, delay, delay. Christine Blasey Ford has agreed to come before the Senate and make a testimonial and testify against Brett Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh's already agreed to testify in his own defense, of course, but now the problem is that Ford no longer wants to come and testify because she is too afraid to fly across the country. No, folks, I'm not kidding. This is absolutely serious. Christine Blasey Ford has come out on the record and said that she doesn't want to fly across the country, so she's asked congressional Republicans to hold off the hearing until she can drive across the country from California to D.C. And of course, there are the people that are on the left side of the aisle that don't want there to be any sort of testimony, hearing, confirmation vote, or any other sort of thing until there's a full FBI investigation into a he said, she said event that has no corroborating details or any sort of details surrounding when, where, what date, or who else was involved. In fact, the majority of the people who are involved are saying that they have no recollection of any of this happening, which is blowing the story apart left and right. Now, Democrat Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii has come out and said that it appears that the Republicans are going to go through and ram Kavanaugh through come hell or high water. She actually made a statement about this on C-SPAN in front of the Senate. Let's listen to what Hirono has to say.
How unfair is that? And that's why I'm really grateful that the leaders of her school are coming forward. They organized a letter drive to stand with Dr. Ford, and they're going to have a few words to say in a couple of minutes, but this is not fair. I'm counting on the members of the press to point out that this is a fast track. They are totally intent on getting Judge Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court, come hell or high water. Come hell or high water. And you have to ask yourself, why? And why isn't Judge Kavanaugh asking for an FBI investigation if he has nothing to hide? You all should continue to press that point.
Now, I can honestly come out and say that as a man in this country, as somebody who's interested in running for politics, and in general as somebody who regards the Fourth and Fifth Amendments as fundamental building blocks to the society that we've created and the freedom that we enjoy in this country, yes, I do want to see Brett Kavanaugh rammed through the Senate, and I want to see this happen. It's very obvious, as I stated in the beginning, that between Christine Blasey Ford and Mazie Hirono and all of the other Democrat senators, that this is a stall tactic to try and get Brett Kavanaugh's conversation pushed through until after the 2018 midterms, when they have the 1 in 3 chance of winning back the Senate and then just denying Trump any other pick until 2020 or until they impeach him, whichever comes first. Even though I highly doubt that they will ever get a 2/3 vote on Congress to get him removed from office. But it does go further than that. I mean, Brett Kavanaugh is about to be denied his constitutional right and responsibility that comes forward from Donald Trump's constitutional right and responsibility because of an allegation that was placed against him that had no due process behind it. There's not been an investigation, there's not been an indictment, there has not been a conviction, and as far as Our legal system should be concerned Brett Kavanaugh is innocent. He has not been proven guilty in a court of law by a jury of his peers. What do you think this means for the rest of us going forward, especially people who dissent against the power structure of the country and a federalized power system that the people on the left and even some on the right seem very intent to put into place? What do you think that means for the rest of us? Is it off to the gulags because, somebody might have said something once or twice here and there 20 years ago? We don't need any more trial by jury anymore. Let's just abolish all lawyers and all juries and all judges. We'll let the state decide who's guilty and who's not. This really sounds a lot like the people in communist Russia who came out and said, hey, bring me the man and I'll find the crime. This is a dangerous thing for the American people, and this is a reason that we do want to see Kavanaugh confirmed. It's coming past the point of him being a strict constitutionalist, which was the reason that he was nominated in the first place. Right from the time that Kennedy said he was going to retire, there has been a strategy among the left. First, they put up the mass hysteria that anybody that Trump picks is going to end the rights of everybody, especially women and minorities in this country. And now they're sitting here trying to stall this until after the midterms. This is their campaign right now because they lost their August recess. There are people that say this is about Roe, and I don't believe that for a second because Kavanaugh was out saying that he had no intention to seek out turning over Roe. But for the most part, this is the campaign. This is the answer to the fact that there was no August recess. And the fact that McConnell said that you can't go home and campaign in August because you've been stalling putting judges into place for this entire 2-year process. And now I need you to get judges in place before the midterms. The people couldn't go home and campaign, so now they're campaigning from their Senate seats. They're grandstanding this out. They're putting this kangaroo court trial out there to show that they're not going to let Trump do anything, and they are going to prevent him from nominating another Supreme Court pick. Since they couldn't go home and do it, they're going to do it right from D.C. with the cameras of C-SPAN, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox pointed right at them. Now, this isn't the only thing that Hirono had to say this week that was controversial. I was looking through some clips and I found a clip of Jake Tapper from CNN State of the Union interviewing Hirono on a series of topics around Kavanaugh. And I landed on a little spot that I'm going to use here where he actually outrightly asked her if the reason that they're pushing for this whole he said, she said thing from the party to be true is because Kavanaugh has stated outright that he has no opinion on Roe versus Wade. I'm only going to use this small clip for the interest of time in this video, but I do recommend everybody go through and watch the full 10-minute interview because Tapper hits on a number of other topics that I think are very important to talk about in this case. Let's listen to what Hirono has to say.
So 4 people said to be at the party Ford described have denied knowledge of the incident. Brett Kavanaugh, obviously, Mark Judge, who she says was in the room, P.J. Smith, and even Ford's longtime friend Leland Kaiser. So there hasn't been a law enforcement investigation, but there are these statements from the 4 people she remembers being there who don't remember the incident or don't even remember being at the party in question, according to her friend Leland Kaiser, who says she believes her,
Yes.
but doesn't have any memory of it.
Yes.
Doesn't Kavanaugh have the same presumption of innocence as anyone else in America?
I put his denial in the context of everything that I know about him in terms of how he approaches his cases. As I said, his credibility is already very questionable in my mind and in the minds of a lot of my fellow Judiciary Committee members, the Democrats. So he comes and, when I say that he's very outcome-driven, he has an ideological agenda. It's very outcome-driven, and I can sit here and talk to you about some of the cases that exemplifies his, in my view, inability to be fair in the cases that come before him. This is a person that is going to be sitting on our Supreme Court making decisions that will impact women's reproductive choice. he very much is against women's reproductive choice. And I can tell you 2 very important cases in which he applied the same standard but came to totally different results to make it much harder for women to get this kind of coverage. So there are so many indications of his own lack of credibility.
It sounds to me like you're saying because you don't trust him on policy and because you don't believe him when he says, for instance, that he does not have an opinion on Roe v. Wade, you don't believe him about this allegation about what happened at this party in 1982. Is that fair?
Well, this is why it is so important that there be at least an investigation so that there's some effort at collaboration. We think that there was a lot of drinking going on. As far as his friend Mark Judge, not even testifying, that is astounding to me. He was right there in that room. He refuses to testify.
Well, he says he doesn't remember an incident. I mean,
so that means there's a lot of drinking going on. This is the environment with this school, apparently. And meanwhile, Dr. Ford has come forward and said,
I think Kavanaugh's lying, though, is what you're saying.
Well, I believe her. Let's put it that way. There's credibility to her story, and I'm going to make sure that I and others, the Democrats at least, want to make sure that she is able to come forward. And there's nothing for her to gain by even coming forward with this.
Now, I don't know about any of you, but when I heard that, it sounded an awful lot to me like Hirono came out and said that she doesn't really care about the victim, or if the allegations are even true, she just wants them to be true because Kavanaugh has credibility issues. Now, as I've been watching this entire story, I noted the fact that, if this keeps going on forever and ever and ever, more and more people are going to suddenly, mysteriously come forward and say that Brett Kavanaugh touched them here, touched them there. And on Sunday, this happened once again. It was actually an hour before I watched one of my friends' live streams. Now, with this delay here, I kind of noted in the back of my head that I was a little bit surprised that nobody else was coming forward while we were having delays. And, just in general, when we watched this happen to Trump, it was one person came forward, then another, then another, then another, then another, and most of it was completely unsubstantiated. And this seems to be the same situation. On Sunday, another woman mysteriously came forward with an allegation that Kavanaugh waved his junk in her face when he was 18 or 19, his freshman year of college at Yale. Once again, there's been no substantiating evidence. There doesn't seem to be anybody else that can corroborate the story or can come up with any sort of details. And from what I've understand from reading about this, it seems that there's not really a lot of details surrounding the when, the where, and the how. But this is a story I'm going to watch a little bit closer as it starts to develop, because it's only in its earliest stages right now. There have been some other allegations that have come out in the weeks past, and I'd like to talk about a couple of them that particularly caught my interest, because they really seem to be opinion, and yet the people that are distributing them are acting as if they're absolute fact and able to be used in a court of law. So let's take a look at what HuffPo has to say. According to the Huffington Post, when Amy Chua was a law clerk, she went to go and work in Brett Kavanaugh's employ, and one of her friends told her to be careful, make sure she dressed properly, because Kavanaugh liked his law clerks to look a certain way. Now, yes, this has some serious implications if you read into it one way or another, but if you sit down and read this article, it becomes very apparent very quickly that the woman who told Amy Chua that she had to look a certain way for Brett Kavanaugh was very vague on what that way actually was. There didn't seem to be any actual details in how she was supposed to look to go and be a law clerk for the dirty old man, Judge Kavanaugh. But this actually pales in comparison to the other article that I came across while I was researching to do this video this past week. Again, this was something that was presented to me while I was listening to Shapiro, and then I had to go hunt down the article and find it and read it for myself because it was so unbelievable that somebody would actually say this and do this and come to this conclusion based on even the shaky evidence that's out there from the details that Ford was able to come forward with. Let's see what Time had to say. Now, the Time article starts out by saying that Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation is now the ultimate test of political power in 2018. And to read through the article, you start out, you say, Kavanaugh looks every bit like the world's most decent man, with his even demeanor, sparkling resume. The beginning of this is completely complimentary. But the focus when you look in this article is when you look about halfway through the first paragraph. They talk about how Kavanaugh was the ultimate role model, talking about his daughters, the majority of female law clerks he's hired, and the fact that his girls' basketball team that he coached, his daughter's basketball team, was actually in the hearings watching all of this happen. This seems like a great article on its top. But when you scroll down and you look a little bit further into the article, you see that the demeanor of it starts to change. They talk about the hazy accusations and how there's almost no evidence. This reads from the beginning like a semi-conservative article. But as you go further and further down, the author starts to pick Kavanaugh apart and try to talk about the fact that he was a bad person, that he was attacking a 15-year-old at the time, trying to pull her clothes off and get at her teenage body. And in the end, the article states that now the girls' basketball team that was standing behind him and standing up for him in their little prep school skirts and bare legs going out look very, very different in the light of the fact that these accusations have come out. This argument is garbage, and I feel sickened by the fact that I read it. I feel sickened by the fact that somebody had the audacity to come out and suggest that Kavanaugh might consider going out and attacking and sexually assaulting his daughter's friends and his daughter's teammates. This is one of the worst things out there, and other than the fact that we need to be able to reference this and show that it actually happened, I think Time should really be thinking about whether or not they should take this article down. Yes, it is true, the fact that there is an allegation out there that Brett Kavanaugh assaulted a 15-year-old, but what they don't take into account when they wrote this article and they tried to smear an actual honest, decent human man is the fact that he was 17 at the time, and an attraction to a 15-year-old by a 17-year-old would be completely normal. Nobody else would bat an eye in that. People would even think a little bit older would be completely normal. I don't personally, but I do understand the fact that a 17-year-old guy liking a 15-year-old girl is completely normal. To suggest now that a man who is married to someone who is presumably of an appropriate age and now has a daughter of his own has some sort of appetite for teenagers just based on the fact that he had an appetite for teenagers when he was a teenager himself is just disgusting. You're sitting here now not only trying to stall somebody and destroy his career, but you're trying to prevent him from ever having another career again. You're going through the unpersoning process. You're trying to make it so not only can he not be a Supreme Court justice because you want to get that talking point for the midterms coming out, you're also going out there and trying to make sure that no law office, no bench, no nothing else will ever touch this person with a 10-foot pole again. That he'll have to live off his savings until he's completely poor and not allowed to engage in society anymore. This was the thing that I wanted to talk about most today, because there's Me Too, and then there's just wrong. And this was an example of something that was just wrong and needs to stop. Now, while these attacks seem to be centered around keeping the vote from happening until after the midterm elections, it becomes a rallying point for the enemies of Kavanaugh, the enemies of Trump, and the enemies of our republic and way of life. It gives them ways to go out and find people who might have another hazy allegation that they can launch against Kavanaugh, something else that they can use. If Grassley had had the vote last week like he absolutely should have done because the hearings were over, this second accuser wouldn't have been able to come forward, and there's an impeachment process to come out if there would happen to be an FBI investigation, or any other sort of crime that was committed by Kavanaugh that they could find after he was in office. We do have a process to take care of that. But unfortunately, this is a couple of things, absolutely. This is the Democrats in the Senate trying to campaign for 2020. This is their single issue vote that I warned was coming 3 months ago when Kennedy retired. And this is a revenge for Merrick Garland as well. The Senate Democrats not only want to keep any pick from Trump out because he's not supposed to be in office because he's not one of them, but they also want to make sure that the Senate Republicans feel the wrath from trying to keep Merrick Garland from sitting on the bench. The hope right now is the fact that the Democrats can take back the Senate in 2018, which means that after the articles are filed and the investigation is brought forward, when presumably the Democrats win the House, the Senate actually has the ability to do something with that, and then they can try and rally the 2/3 vote to get Trump removed, ruining his political career and scaring away anybody else who wants to go and join the government but hasn't been trained from birth to do so. This is symbolic on numerous levels, but as I mentioned before, this also sets dangerous precedents for our country and our way of life, and the way that we view the accused in our justice system in general. I hope that Senate Republicans understand what's at stake here and do the right thing. I'm a little bit worried that they're not going to, but I really hope that they get the chance, they hear the testimonies, and they do the right thing. For the sake of all of us in this country, Democrat, Republican, Independent, and otherwise. What do you think about the process so far? Can you think of any ways to help make sure that Blasey Ford gets out to testify on time and gets her fair hearing and gets Kavanaugh his fair hearing as well? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.
You're